They help, so basically they feature you and your business on the NASDAQ Tower in Times Square.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very surreal moment and very emotional, because to imagine seeing your face on such a global stage, something that I'm sure many of us had not even imagined would happen,
Yeah.
at least not at this time,
That seems like the thing. You're calling all your friends and family and say,
Exactly,
go check this
exactly.
out.
Yeah, and it's just a testament to how far we've come, I think, as a business.
Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Nairobi Gold Rush podcast. My name's Scott. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of SafeBoda, and we're interviewing great tech leaders here in Nairobi throughout the podcast. I've got a very exciting guest today. We have Esther Manthi. She is the founder and CEO of Brains for AI. So welcome, Esther, to the podcast.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me.
We're very excited. And just to start out, why don't you tell us about your company, Brains for AI, and tell us what you're doing with the company?
Yeah, so Brains for AI is an organization that's dedicated to expanding access to AI literacy and education across Africa. And what we do is we design AI learning experiences and training that meet people where they are. So that could be literally or figuratively. For instance, we could have a high school student here in Nairobi, or an informal learner in Lagos, for instance, or even an educator in rural Eswatini somewhere who's just wanting to learn about AI and they're curious on how to get started, and how to access this. So our focus has been to make AI knowledge as accessible and as inclusive as possible, especially for underserved communities across Africa. Yeah, and we are based here in Nairobi. We've started here, but our reach is slowly but surely beginning to span across Africa, which is exciting. Yeah, so in a nutshell, I think that's what we do at Brains for AI.
That's super exciting. I know AI is a super hot topic right now. People are very excited about AI and how they can bring that into the corporate. So maybe you could lay out for us the plan of how you're training this next generation of students in AI and then kind of working into the corporate space as well.
Yeah, so our courses or our training, they're really about accessibility and adaptability. So meeting people where they are. And I think the thing is that we realize that there's a huge knowledge gap in Africa currently. And the statistics say that over 60% of Africa's population is currently under the age of 25. So, and we realize that there are many startups in education coming up across Africa, which is an incredibly positive thing. So we are part of that space and part of the many, many startups who are working to bridge this gap. So how we do it is our guest target market is twofold. So we focus on learners, and the learners could be high school students, like I just said, or university students. We've partnered with high schools, university students, or even educators who are just, or people who have training programs that are looking to integrate AI into their learning. So we have workshops, online sessions, community projects where we go in, we come in with our teams, and then we begin to train these communities who have reached out to us and are interested in learning about AI. For high schools, for instance, our programs tend to be more hands-on. They tend to be more gamified because these are young students. So just to give them an opportunity to explore AI using real-world examples. So we have those hands-on projects and they build machine learning models, simple things, but just to get them to understand the concepts, right? And then for informal learners or university students, our programs would now be more focused towards practical application. So in this case, it's more focused towards how can AI open up new career paths for you? Or how can you integrate AI into your current workflows if you're an educator or a trainer, right? And then once they have this knowledge and skill, the second part of our mission is twofold. So first of all, increase the level of AI expertise on the continent. And then once we have more people who are knowledgeable about AI and know how to use it, they can now begin to build solutions that are making differences and affecting them in their local communities. So that's the goal, to create, to create a community where we have problem solvers and people who are building more solutions on AI instead of just consumers or just high level theory. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really exciting. When you look at the school setting, so you mentioned you're going into high schools and into universities. Are there certain criteria that a school has to have before you can work with them? Do they have to have a certain number of computers, like good internet connectivity? How does that work? Because I know a lot of the schools I've dealt with, they don't have the resources to even get involved with AI.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think in Africa, infrastructure is still a huge challenge. So so for learners, especially from rural or low income areas, I think things like internet connectivity or reliable electricity or even the digital devices themselves are still quite a luxury for some of for some of these learners in these areas, right? But then so what we do is, because we've experienced these challenges firsthand, I'll give you an example. So for one of the schools we've partnered with here in Kenya, because of the infrastructure challenges and the internet has always been patchy, we've had students taking turns to use a single computer lab, for instance, and let alone a single computer, because you almost always have at least three, I would say four, five, six, huddled up over one computer,
Yeah,
because
that's
that's
a
the one that
challenge.
has the internet connectivity. So it's a group of students huddled up over this one computer. So we've had challenges like that. But then, so we've had to improvise because we've seen the kind of hunger and the level of hunger that exists in these schools. So the things we've had to do is to print out, I would say, slides, for instance, or AI diagrams, and then teach the students using a whiteboard,
Yeah,
just so that we can meet this hunger, because they're very curious to learn about AI. So those are some of the infrastructure challenges we've been facing, and internet connectivity is a huge issue. But then, so the other thing is, at Brains for AI, we are now beginning to design with these realities in mind. You know, our programs now tend to be more lightweight and more low data tools, things that can run well in such environments. So we're beginning to adjust just based on what we've seen already in the market.
yeah,
And hopefully, God willing, somewhere in the near future, we'll have an opportunity to partner with maybe mobile providers and create zero-rated content, for instance, where the learners can then begin to access key lessons without using their data bundles. Or in areas where electricity is such a huge challenge, we can have maybe solar powered digital kits, for instance, and then these can be shared among community learning centers, you know, or among schools.
yeah.
So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. The access of data in Kenya is quite good, I would say, even compared to the US. I was just in the US traveling for a month, and I would go to some areas of the US and I couldn't get good data.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, well, pretty much anywhere in Kenya, you know,
Yeah.
I'm sure not in the extreme rural areas, but even a lot of places in the rural areas, you can get good data. So
Mm-hmm.
if you had that idea of zero rated data
Yeah.
and companies would be willing to partner with you, then it could really bring that level of education.
Yeah.
And you're building up the community that these engineers might come and work for those companies in the
Mm-hmm.
future.
Yeah.
Right? I assume that would be like the ultimate goal, to get students jobs at the later stage once
Yeah.
they get that training.
Yeah, long term though, long term, I don't believe that infrastructure should be a reason that someone should be left out of the AI conversation.
Yeah.
I think what we are deciding to do is to use what to adapt to what is there now currently. Whatever infrastructure is there now, we're deciding to adapt to that, because even if you look at the rate or the pace of mobile adoption across Africa, or if you look at the rise of community-based innovation centers like iHub in Kenya or MEST in Ghana, you
Yeah.
realize that when people are given a little, they're able to do a lot with it. So I think that the resolution here is, we're still going to build systems that are more inclusive and accessible, regardless of what the infrastructure looks like right
Oh,
now.
that's really good.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed is that AI requires a lot of computing power.
Mm-hmm.
So they talk about these GPUs and these
Mm-hmm.
huge data centers. I know in Kenya, sometimes we don't have as great of access locally to those data centers. I know
Mm-hmm.
as the CTO of my company, I use these providers like Amazon or
Mm-hmm.
Google Cloud or Microsoft,
Yeah.
instead of using the local data centers as much. What's kind of your view on that? does Kenya get the computing power to run these type of AI models? Are they going to have to outsource for a while, or should we be investing in more infrastructure to run these models?
We should absolutely be investing more in infrastructure to run these models. And I'm glad you asked that because I think just 3 days ago, I think there was a conference or summit of sort in Marrakech, Morocco. And one of our ambassadors was there. And I think they signed a deal with a tech company. And they're planning to build the first, I think, AI factory in Africa, in Kenya.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah, and I saw that and I was very, very excited because then that would answer your question. How
Yeah.
do we then resolve this computing power and access to data issues? So we are definitely making steps and taking steps in the right direction to improve and build up our infrastructure in Kenya.
Well, when you have these huge investors in the US, you see these numbers coming of the AI investments in the US. So OpenAI, they get so many billions of dollars, Anthropic, all these other companies, right? You see billions of dollars that they're investing, which is huge amounts of money. And maybe there's a little investment in Kenya, but if there's any AI investment, it's quite a bit smaller. What would you say to those US companies, to get them to invest here in AI in Kenya? Like what's needed from them? What's most important to bring that investment here?
So I think that would be maybe I would look at that from two different perspectives. So first of all, just this month we had the Global AI Summit on Africa in Rwanda, and that was honestly a landmark moment because we had the launch of the Africa Declaration on Artificial Intelligence, which was signed by the 54 countries. And I think, first of all, and these are some of the things the investors are looking at, I think. So the 54 countries signed it, and I believe this was a significant step towards a unified vision for artificial intelligence across Africa. And one of the things was they introduced the Africa AI Fund, which does propose I think, 60 billion US dollars.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot. That's not small money. And I think so. If the investors can look at um, the kind of steps we are taking towards showing them that Africa is charting its own course on artificial intelligence and trying to build and shape its own future, then I think if these kinds of initiatives are not enough to draw their attention and see the kind of steps we are making, then I don't know what else we can do
Yeah,
to
exactly.
convince them to invest in AI in Africa.
Sure. Well, it seems like we're on the right track, right? It sounds like we're getting data centers that are maybe getting ready to be opened here.
Yeah.
Hopefully work out the power issues and all the things that are needed for the data centers, which is
Mm-hmm.
always an infrastructure challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then it seems like you're coming in and trying to fill the gap with the knowledge base of AI engineers and training the next group, I guess, is where you see you're coming in mostly. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, this whatever is happening in Africa right now, as far as AI is concerned, is kind of a sweet spot for brains for AI and any other startups in edtech, especially who are focusing on bridging the AI knowledge gap. Because the way we see it is we are positioning ourselves to be a bridge between the grassroots and the global AI market and the global AI um, companies. So we see ourselves as creating a pipeline for them because we are the people who are now on the ground training the next generation of AI experts and AI innovators and AI problem solvers. And then we are building an ecosystem in Africa where they have this whole pool of people who are now going to lead and drive change within this space. So we see ourselves as that bridge for sure
Sure.
between the grassroots and the global AI companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and it seems like you've mentioned you started in Nairobi,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to even expand further at some point.
Mm-hmm.
If I was a young girl sitting in Turkana, let's say, someplace in a very rural area,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to get involved with AI or learn about AI, what steps do you think that somebody in those areas could take to start learning more and have access to AI training?
So I think the onus would be on organizations like more on organizations like ours, and not on the young girl in this
Yeah,
case,
sure.
because they have the desire and the hunger and they're curious for the knowledge. So that's our responsibility to now find ways of getting to these underserved and remote areas. So what I would tell them is or what I would rather tell us and companies like us is there's a lot of young girls just like her, not just in Turkana, but then many, many rural areas, around Africa who are looking for this knowledge. And this is exactly why we're doing what we're doing, so that um, we can have more reach and increase our reach and reach such young girls and such students who are looking for knowledge, but then they don't have access and they cannot participate in this AI conversation. So, basically, our goal is to reach such girls and give them the opportunities and sort of level the playing field for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how did you learn about AI and become so passionate about it?
Um, so, fun fact, I didn't always think I would end up in tech. And in fact, when I was in school, all my friends would tell me that I should pursue maybe a career in media or journalism. And I guess they liked how I did my class presentations. So for the longest time, I thought I would end up in media or journalism. But then, so if we rewind just a little bit, I went to visit my brother, who he's super smart. He went to MIT and then he ended up settling there. So one summer I was still in school. I went to visit him, and then he was working as a software engineer at the time. So my brother, and this was just around that time where the mobile AI apps boom was just taking place, and every company needed an app for this and an app for that. So I got there, and my brother told me, "Hey, you need to learn mobile app development because this is the future, and if you learn about it now, you'll be ahead of the curve."
That's
So yeah, so I got curious, and then just like that, because he used to have a lot of friends who would ask him to, do some side gigs and help them with building projects. So just like that, it happened that during that summer, one of his friends who was a risk analyst at Chase Bank needed an app, because the apps were the thing back then, right? An Android app to help him with something like data entry, I think, for his tasks were very repetitive. So he needed an app of sorts to help him with that part of his job. So my brother invited me to build the app with him. And then that's when everything changed for me. I fell in love with coding at that point. So remember, I'd just visited and I was going to pursue media when I came back to Kenya. But then now I was like, I'm really enjoying this coding thing. I especially love the fact that you could use tech to solve real world problems, to solve people's problems. I enjoyed that bit. And to me, coding was like art. So you have a vision of something and then you build it line by line, and then finally you see this thing come to life. It's very, very Frankenstein like, but only way cooler. So I came back and I decided to pursue, the software development route. So I graduated and then I began working as a software developer, software engineer for a number of years, around 8, 9 years. And then AI came along, and AI felt just like the natural transition, and everything I loved about tech was now encapsulated in AI. So that's how the journey began, from tech. And then the AI boom came in, and obviously my curiosity led me to AI, and I began learning and teaching myself about AI.
Well, that's quite a wild journey. I mean, that's a very different path than you thought you would originally be going down.
Yeah, it's not conventional for sure.
Wow, but it seems to have worked out pretty well for you.
Yeah.
How did your brother get to MIT? That sounds like a crazy, that's one of the top schools in the world to get into.
He's super smart. So back in the day when he was still in Kenya, I don't know if they still do this in Kenya, but then I know they do it in my alma mater, the Kenya High School.
Yeah.
Not sure if they still do it in other schools, but then if you are a top performing student and you would get all A's in your final KCSE exam, then you would get scholarships. They would provide you with the opportunity to apply to this Ivy League school. So that's how he ended up at MIT.
Yeah, that's quite a crazy ride as well, I
Yeah.
assume. So now you've gone and you've built your first app. Did you actually release the app that you were building for his contact at Chase Bank, or more just learning what he was doing, helping him out with it?
So it was more of learning what he was, because this was my very first time coding.
You didn't do it
Yeah.
before at all, yeah.
No. I did write a few lines of code, but then it was just more for personal use. It wasn't anything that would be published on the App Store or anything like that. But then I saw, like, from start to finish what that process looked like, the whole debugging process, and that's how I was immersed into coding. Yeah.
Okay. And so did you start working right after you graduated? Like, how did the process work for you there to actually get like a software development job?
It's interesting because I did land an internship, luckily,
Mhm.
through a connection. So my sister connected me to one of her friends who they have a tech firm. Excuse me, they have a tech firm here in Nairobi, and she asked him to give me an internship. So I was so excited because this would be my very first job as a software development intern. But then, so what I didn't know is that on the first day I got to work to the office, I saw something that looked like a scene out of Big Bang Theory, to be
Uh-huh.
to be very honest, because the guys were super geeky. There was not a single lady on the team. So this is my very first job, and then I'm the only lady on the
Oh
team.
no.
Yeah, it was very, very intimidating for me. And but then they were also friendly. So and then they're just spewing out this technical jargon, and everything felt so scary and intimidating. But then I powered through. I mean, I didn't give up, and I think technology and software engineering back then, and even what software engineering teams look like now, is not what they looked like when we were starting out.
Yeah.
There's a lot more diversity now than there was at the time, and I'm really glad I didn't sort of give up or get intimidated.
Yeah.
Because the first question, obviously, you have those thoughts that creep in, and you're like, am I really in the right career? Should I have just done media? Because you see a lot of women in media, and that's why representation also matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you showed up and those geeky guys were there,
hmm
was there anything funny that you noticed that they would do that was kind of unusual?
I mean, you know how geeky guys tend to behave. Usually they keep to themselves,
Uh-huh.
first of all.
Yeah.
But then I think because I was the only lady and I think the youngest as well on the
Mm.
team, so they were very warm towards me,
Yeah.
very understanding, very patient, even whenever I was given tasks
Uh-huh.
and I was collaborating with senior engineers on the projects. Yeah, I think they're just the typical geeky guys, and they talk about Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
So it's Big Bang Theory, a scene out of Big Bang Theory, but then that's the actual conversation they also talk about during
Yeah.
lunch break and things like that.
Yeah. The
But
actual topics that are on
yeah,
TV that you wouldn't even
yeah,
imagine somebody's talking about, they're actually
yeah,
taking the time and
yeah,
talking to you about those things at work. It's
yeah,
quite
yeah.
crazy.
But it was an interesting time working in that firm.
Yeah, I know whenever I started working in tech, I mean, like you mentioned, the diversity's increased quite a bit because when I
hmm
first started, to have a lady in the tech team was quite it was like I don't know what you would describe it, like the going to the zoo or something, because it would be like, wow, it's like so amazing.
Yeah,
And now it's way more diverse, I guess. And
yeah,
so really we've have a lot of great tech leaders on my team. I've got engineering managers who that have come up through the ranks, and it's been
hmm
really great to increase the diversity on the team.
hmm
So, and I guess has that sort of been your experience as you've gone along? Like, have you struggled like coming into that scenario where you've got all these geeky guys, and then you're coming in as the lady and trying to, integrate into that system over time, or is it really improved over time?
It's definitely improved over
Yeah.
time. So over the years, the experience has gotten much better.
Hmm.
But then, so right before I started Brains for AI, even at my previous company, I think I still, and this is now mid, so we are well into way after 2015. So it's not like many, many years ago.
Yeah, sure.
But then I still was the first lady again on the software engineering team. But then at least this time you had different ladies doing not really coding, but then on the engineering team,
Yeah,
but then focusing on other aspects.
sure.
So whether it's the product management or this or that. So it's definitely improved over time, but that was my experience for a very, very long time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And where do you think the gap is in Kenya, particularly, why it's harder for ladies to get into software engineering?
Um, I don't know if So I don't know if the right way to put it is, I don't know if it's still harder for them to get into engineering. Yeah, I'm struggling with that
Is
a little bit. It's
was
not,
it? I guess the question would be: is it more they're not as interested in it, or are there barriers for them to get into it?
I think for the longest
Yeah.
time, the deterrent has been tech is intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and just like if I use myself as an example, So it was easier for me to default, and crawl back into those thoughts where I was asking myself, should I just go into media because media and journalism is less intimidating,
Yeah.
and because there's great representation over there.
Yeah.
So I think it's an issue of the tech can be extremely intimidating and also representation. So most ladies, I think maybe that might not be the case anymore, but then I know it's the mindset that it's too complex, it's intimidating, and I see a lot more representation maybe in these other fields and careers. So it's probably best for me to just go towards something that looks more familiar and relatable, I
Yeah.
guess.
I guess you would recommend it to ladies
Absolutely.
out
Oh
there that are
yeah. Oh
trying
yeah.
to
Oh yeah.
look
Oh
for a
yeah.
good career to establish themselves in. It's not too
Oh yeah.
intimidating.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's really exciting. And so then you mentioned that you were, I guess, for a time working for a company overseas for a while. Is that correct? Or and how was that experience? I mean, was there a lot of I guess interacting with different cultures and things like that? How was that for you?
Yeah, so and that was right after my software development internship.
Mhm.
So right after that, I was lucky enough to land um, a software engineering role with a company based out of Houston, Texas, an oil and gas company. And they were looking for, again, mobile Android developers.
Mhm.
And what they were building at the time was an app that could talk to, they had these devices that would record ground movement, so seismic data app that they would then use to bury in the oil fields.
Mhm.
And then whenever there's ground movement, it would record that information and communicate with the mobile app, so they would know where to drill, and look
Mhm.
for oil and things like that. So it was a it was I still remember that project to date because it was very interesting. That was my first time working with just Bluetooth and how an Android app can communicate with such devices via Bluetooth. So, and the team was also diverse because we had people from different countries. So, um, I think, and that was early on when now agile was becoming a thing, and you have scrums
Yeah.
and all those things. So I was thrust into this whole new world where now I have to, you have to work with different time zones and that kind of thing. So straight out of school, and then it felt very interesting and very different. But it was, yeah, the project in itself is what I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of interesting with these companies now being able to go more international. I
Hmm.
feel even maybe 10 years ago, it would be difficult for a company to hire somebody, be a US company and hire somebody in Kenya because that idea of hiring international software teams was like
Yeah.
a more foreign concept. But
Yeah.
I guess it's really exploded now
Yeah.
and there's a lot more opportunities maybe.
And thanks to COVID, I think that's why we see the explosion of more remote roles and remote jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe I guess when it comes to AI, that's really opening up opportunities. Do you see that coming where you can help train people in AI and then they can get a job with these big Silicon Valley companies?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't see why not, because I think everyone now sees, especially again post-COVID, that it's possible to work from any part of the world, as long as you're able to work legally for the organization, of course.
Yeah.
But then and I think now um, with with AI and all the changes in the workforce that are taking place, and people can have these remote meetings, and remote scrum meetings. So it makes it even more possible. And there are more apps that are making that possible for organizations just to collaborate,
Sure.
Yeah. So thanks to AI,
Yeah.
it's possible for people to work from anywhere.
Yeah, it's a big market now.
Yeah.
I know it sometimes is hard to understand the types of problems AI and machine learning are solving. What are some of the most exciting use cases you've seen, even here in Kenya, for AI and machine learning? Like maybe have you seen some interesting
Yeah,
concepts?
and I think for not just Kenya, I think for Africa, the theme is quite common because our challenges tend to be similar, just because I think because of the region. So most of the use cases you would find would be in healthcare, would be in um, in education. So there's a lot of generative AI now in the classroom.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen, I think it's an app. I'm blanking out on the name, but then I think that's being built in Tanzania.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using now generative AI in their classrooms, and they can now translate everything in Swahili, and teach them in Swahili. And they have an adaptive learning kind of platform. So the most interesting use cases, I would say, which are common across Africa, would be definitely agriculture.
Yeah.
And farmers are now able to use AI to make better farming decisions using maybe weather and soil data.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a company called Kuza, if I'm not wrong, that does something like that in Kenya. So it would definitely be in education and agriculture, and the rise of adaptive learning, I would say, in the classrooms, which is a huge thing for Africa in itself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's a lot of great agriculture applications. I worked with a company called Oneacre Fund, and one of the things when we first started with Oneacre Fund is we used to deliver fertilizer and seed to rural communities, kind of on microfinance loans.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is you don't want to give the fertilizer to the farmer too early,
Mm-hmm.
because if you give it to them, it'll get spoiled. They'll misuse it maybe. They'll try to resell it, get some cash when
Yeah.
they need some cash. They're going to sell the fertilizer. So you want the fertilizer to arrive at the time they need it.
Mm-hmm.
What we used to do is we used to wait for the rains to start, and maybe 3 times it rains, then you send the fertilizer, and it's to millions of farmers throughout Africa. So it's this big problem of knowing when to send the supplies. But using AI and machine learning, you can gather more data about what the rains are doing, and how's the soil health, and all these factors that go into predicting, okay, when do we need to optimally send the
Yeah.
fertilizer so it comes at the right time.
Yeah.
So you don't send it too late, you don't send it too early. Those are just simple examples of where you can use these models to get a lot of data and improve things.
Eh,
On the educational space, though, what is your thoughts? I mean, is AI good or bad for education? I know my children, um, they have to do a book report. The Chat GPT, they just type in and then just copy and paste what the results are, right? What are your thoughts on that side of things, of how it can be used effectively in the classroom?
So I think first and foremost, what I believe is that we are at a maybe point of no return when it comes to AI. So the sooner maybe parents or guardians or even educational institutions accept and understand what that means for education and for the classroom, the better it would be. Because I've heard of stories where maybe students were penalized because they use ChatGPT, or parents. I've even have friends who are parents who are saying now all their kids are doing is you would ask someone to sit and finish their assignment, and then they're like, okay, mommy, and then you go and then they quickly just type the question into ChatGPT, and then they copy and paste like you were saying.
Yeah.
So, and I think the reason people are struggling is because they don't understand that, again, we are at this point of no return. So what we need to do is to maybe adapt to how, I think a better approach would be to see how can we leverage maybe ChatGPT and
Mhm.
still get someone to complete the assignment or do their research without any kind of plagiarism or something like that.
Mhm.
So it's the first step is to understand that there's nothing we can do at this point. So
Yeah.
it's about adapting to the changes that are already happening and
Yeah.
taking place, instead of having this rigid stance where you cannot use ChatGPT in this and that, and then they still go around and use it. So it's coming up with ways where we can make it acceptable, but then in a way that's meaningful to the learners and not just making them lazy, for instance.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a very tricky challenge, I would say. But
Yeah.
like you said, it's here to stay. It's not
Yeah.
going away,
And it's
right?
a delicate balancing act, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something you'd said about machine learning earlier,
Mhm.
and why it's so powerful, and it's why we teach it early, especially to our high school students. So we try to make the sessions as hands-on as possible. Again, because our goal, like I said, is to, yes, to expand access, and access to AI education and opportunities across Africa. But then our approach really is about a mindset shift. That's our goal. We are trying to shift the mindset of Africans. So
Yeah.
we are trying to unlock something within them so they can now begin to see themselves as problem solvers and creative thinkers, critical thinkers,
Sure.
So we have this machine learning workshops, and I remember for one of the workshops, um, so after they were able to build their very fast AI model, one of the students raised their hand and then they asked, so if we can do this with AI, how come we still have this malaria problem in Kenya? How come no one has done anything about it? And I think at that moment, it really hit me hard, and I felt like a proud parent
Yeah.
because now they're moving from passive consumers to critical thinkers, and that's really the goal, of what we do. And so if they can begin to see AI and machine learning from this perspective, then I think we would be moving definitely in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you feel the schools are doing? Maybe when you came up through schools, did they do a good job at teaching you that kind of critical reasoning, or were they more just teaching you facts that you would have to recite for the exam?
Definitely
Yeah.
facts that I would have to recite for the exam. Yeah, yeah. And I think they're doing much better now with the CBC. I grew up under the 844 system, so ours was you definitely have to, get that grade at the end of your it would be 12th grade, which is Form 4 over
Mhm.
here. So you're cramming as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yes, you learn a few things along the way. I'm not completely going to,
Right.
just trash the system, but then it was definitely for the grades, definitely. And I think I learned that much later,
Mhm.
how to be a critical thinker and how to think like how to be a problem solver, to see things from that perspective. And I think that's the beauty of also coding and software engineering, because it tends to teach you how to be a problem solver and a critical thinker. Yeah.
And what advice would you give to like the people that are making the education policy? Like, what could they do to integrate that critical thinking more into the system? Do you have any idea?
Um, so I think if it were up to me,
Mhm.
I think it would be more. I wish. I don't know if they're already doing it in Kenya. I speak for Africa. I don't know if they're. I'm sure there are schools that are already doing this.
Sure.
But if I would have it my way,
Mhm.
then schools would have more hands-on project-based kind of learning. I
Yeah.
think you remember something and you learn best when you're able to maybe work on a project and do something do something hands-on instead of just high-level theory kind of knowledge and training.
Yeah.
So in order to nurture and to cultivate that kind of critical thinking, I think they should try to integrate more hands-on project-based kind of learning into the systems,
Mhm.
into the courses, into the coursework, and that tends to nurture that in the students.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess there's so much involved to get the hands on, but maybe it's like what you were saying. They don't necessarily have to have a computer to do it, but
Yeah.
maybe printed workshops,
Mm-hmm.
steps they can take even kind of offline that might can help.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that would be the first step, because I know when I first came to Kenya, there was all these initiatives like we're going to give a laptop to every first grader,
I remember
and
that.
then
Yeah.
everybody knows that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you have to set the realistic expectation of what's going to happen. So
Yeah.
quite crazy. Well, what tools are you using nowadays to do AI? I mean, what's kind of your favorite tool set that you're training people on?
So at Brains for AI, we tend to keep our stack very lean and
Mhm.
agile.
Yeah.
So we definitely use Python for that backend logic.
Mhm.
And when we're trying to, especially when we're wanting to prototype our AI-based tools, and then we obviously have React and Next.js for the responsive user interfaces. And then obviously you have to have Google Cloud Platform,
Mhm.
and we use that for, just hosting and creating a scalable infrastructure. And then we also have, especially for collaboration, for team collaboration,
Mhm.
we have tools like Notion, I would say,
Mhm.
which make it easier just to work across teams and to manage um, all of your workflows. And then we also have, I think, what's the other tool we have? We also use Figma,
Mhm.
and then we have for databases, very lightweight like Firebase,
Yeah.
for real-time databases and authentication. And
Mhm.
the reason we make it very lean is because we always want to use things that can help us move fast and things that can make us, test things quickly.
Yeah.
So we try to keep it as lean as possible. But then in terms of, can I also just maybe like give a tip of sorts?
Yeah, sure.
So what I would say, what I've seen in the edtech space, that is, it's evolving pretty fast. And at this point, it's safe to say that it's not just about putting classes online anymore.
Yeah.
It's not about putting classrooms online. It's evolving, and the focus, I think the current wave focuses on personalization and accessibility. So you see courses that would focus on adaptive, AI adaptive learning, and bite-sized learning modules now.
Yeah.
And many platforms are also offering skills-based, I think skills-based credentials rather than just the traditional degrees. You see
Yeah.
a lot of that, and you see that on platforms like Coursera and edX. And so I would say one big trend right now, which people who are curious about AI and are looking to, looking for what's relevant and maybe what they can learn just to make them more relevant, I would say courses that are focusing on digital fluency and future work readiness. So AI, data analysis, those are very hot right now.
Uh-huh.
And you have AI and machine learning being offered on many platforms, edX, Coursera, even Google's AI Essentials course. I think it's trending at the moment.
Yeah.
And then you have data analysis and data visualization. So Python, obviously. You have Tableau also for data visualization. And then also because AI and data privacy are such hot button topics, that makes cybersecurity and digital ethics a very relevant field. So a lot of people are venturing into cybersecurity, and digital ethics because of the data privacy concerns.
Sure.
And then for content creators, obviously they use a lot of AI. I think another course which is important to focus on would be, just courses that focus on how to use AI tools like Canva, for instance, for
Yeah.
storytelling, for editing, for animations and things like that. So I think that's the modern toolkit for learning today.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what do you see from your experience in training right now with the young people, particularly, 18, 19-year-old that's out there? What would you recommend these days? Would you recommend more the traditional university machine learning education, or would you recommend they go to a lot of boot camps and the online courses and kind of get this more?
I think our traditional universities are still trying to catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the challenge, at least on this part of the world.
Mm.
I don't think most of the courses are again offering like the things I've talked about, future ready skills, and are relevant to what's happening right now. So I think they're now just trying to catch up. But I know Strathmore University has always kind of been ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
They're always having the latest courses that I think they do their research really well. So they study the market trends and then they adapt to that. So Strathmore is doing a good job.
Yeah.
But the rest of the traditional universities, I think they're still trying to catch up because just recently this week actually, we did have a training workshop in one of the universities, and we just went around, interviewing the students and asking them like, hey, what is AI? What do you think it's about? Have you heard about it? And some of them had a clue as to what it is,
Uh-huh.
but then some of them fumbled a little bit, just trying to explain what it is. And that's the challenge. So I would say the online courses are way ahead of
More advanced,
yeah,
I
more
guess.
advanced, yeah,
All right. Very
and
well.
and more adaptive to what the market trends are looking like at the moment.
Sure. Well,
Yeah,
that's great. I guess shout out to Strathmore University. I
yeah,
guess if you're looking for a good place, I've been there and seen some of the stuff that they're doing. I saw they have a Microsoft partnership or something there that
hmm
was dealing with a lot of the Microsoft tools around AI and machine learning, which is kind of interesting.
hmm
Um, but yeah, it's a tricky thing for people in their education now to know what's the appropriate thing to do.
yeah,
Do you go spend um, hundreds of thousands on an education at the university? I mean, that's what I did back a long time ago.
yeah,
And I did my master's, and you come out of your master's degree, and you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of problem solving, which is good. I really appreciate the problem solving that I got from that.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go to do the practical, and you've learned a lot of theory, but you don't have a lot of practical,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Very little practical. So,
Yeah.
and I think it's a lot worse here. I've talked to people from like the big Kenya universities here, and one guy would tell me, okay, I had a course on Python. I was taking a Python course, and the professor never showed up to class. He just gave us a book at the first lecture, and then
Yeah.
the guy never showed up, and then we just took an exam at the end. And there
Yeah.
was no coding or actual, real world.
Yeah.
And even these are the big universities that are here. So
Yeah, and that's quite common. I
yeah,
mean, even in my time, that was in fact, you would pray and hope that the lecturer doesn't show up. So
yeah,
then you get an opportunity to, do your own things.
uh-huh.
But then, 2 weeks, just 2 weeks before the exam, you'll sit down and then you'll study. If you have to study for 2 weeks straight just to pass the exam, you will. But then we would celebrate whenever the professor wouldn't show up.
Yeah. Don't have
That's
to go to
common.
class.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's pretty amazing. So yeah, I think it's a challenge for students to know what to do now. I
yeah,
think it would be very hard to know how to get the best education. But I guess that's where you're coming to fill the gap there to help
yeah.
give practical real world training. Well, what you're doing, it sounds to me kind of like almost a nonprofit, right? You're trying to build education, you're trying to, bring awareness, you're trying to show people the power that AI has in Kenya and in Africa in whole. Um, how do you make it self-sustainable? How do you
Yeah,
keep it a running business?
I'm glad you asked. So, funding as a nonprofit is always an adventure, I would say. Just to put it lightly, it's an adventure because I think it's equal parts creativity, especially when you're early stages, just like we are.
Yeah.
I would say it's equal parts creativity, maybe equal parts strategy, equal parts optimism,
Mhm.
and equal parts faith. And if you're someone who believes in God like I do, you need tons and tons of faith, just to keep it sustainable in the beginning. So, like in our case, we've our 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 our, our funding model is, yes, for schools and maybe grassroots communities, especially in underserved communities. We do offer our courses and our trainings and workshops for free, or maybe at a highly subsidized rate, right? But then when it comes to corporates who are looking to maybe upskill their teams, or maybe they're looking to raise awareness about responsible AI use, or maybe their goal is to integrate AI into their workflows. So we do charge a fee for corporates, and we realize this early on that just depending on grants will not make us very sustainable.
Right.
And we have received support from organizations that believe in our mission, yes, and that support is what has helped us to pilot our programs, and that kind of support has helped us to expand our reach and build our platforms. And the revenue we receive from the programs, from corporates, that is, they're what help us keep our educational content free for underserved communities. So it's a delicate balancing act between impact and sustainability. So we do want to make the impact, but then we still have to remain sustainable.
And do you find that the funding is easy or difficult to raise here? I mean, when you're looking for grants you mentioned, or the funding that comes from outside these corporates, how do you go about that?
Uh, we all know that fundraising is a full-time job in itself.
Yeah.
So how we've done it is, and this I learned from the Milestone Makers program.
Mhm.
We just completed that earlier this year. What my takeaway from that was the way you can position yourself to receive funding, let me put it that way,
Yeah.
is you have to look for organizations that align with your mission. So, because what we did at the beginning is, hey, oh, there's a funding opportunity here, let's just throw in a grant application. So we would scatter applications all over the place. And then you come up empty and you're wondering, we have such an amazing mission. How come other people don't see that, and
Right.
it never quite made sense. But then I learned the trick is to align your make sure that the organizations you're applying to have their missions aligned with yours.
Sure.
So that way it's easier for them to be able to understand and give towards the causes
Right.
that you care about.
Right. So if you're trying to build education solutions, you don't want to be going to a climate tech investor to be bothering them with trying to raise money, I guess. So you want to find the people who are aligned with your mission.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. When I first started moving to Kenya, I had to raise funds for quite a while. I was doing more the nonprofit space when I came here, and I was building schools and operating schools as part of the program that I was doing. And what was interesting about it is I would go to my family and friends in rural Texas. These are the cowboy type people, that they don't know anything about Africa. It's just because it's like, if I were to mention to you, like, tell me what the biggest problem is in rural Kansas, you probably wouldn't know, that. So it's just a foreign world. And it was very difficult to raise funds. I mean, yes, I could raise the funds based on the friends, family that I had, because they would believe in what I would do. And we had a lot of great supporters who really helped. But then once you try to expand outside of that, particularly coming from the US, yes, there's funds to come this direction, but not everybody's aligned with the same mission. That sort of makes sense, because right now the rhetoric in the US is, okay, we're going to cut all the foreign aid, we're going to cut a lot of programs, because they're more focused on the internals of the country and focusing on those things. And so it's that, what you mentioned, that alignment between what the priorities are. So I think it's hard now for people to raise money from maybe the other countries like the US, going through the current political climate or economic climate. It's probably more challenging now, I would assume, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
I mean, we've seen how challenging it's been, and this is, everyone knows about what happened with USAID, and I think it's a challenge for nonprofits especially, and even more so if you're entirely dependent on grants. I would say it's not an easy time right now. But then I have a question for you, so I'm curious. When you worked for this nonprofit, would you say your experience was just because you have that, US connection, so you have your foot in both countries?
Sure.
So you have one foot in the US and here. So would you say, compared to maybe friends you had who are local, would you say your experience was different? Was it easier for you to be able to access these funds and, just link with your contacts and explain, and would they throw money at you, so to speak?
What I would say is that, there's this idea that, in Africa, the people I've dealt with, they have this opinion that people in the US have just piles of money sitting around. They swim in their money or something like that. And I guess, yes, comparatively, like, salaries are a little bit higher in the US. I mean, your brother probably knows from being in Houston, there's people that have an elevated income, or maybe the salary that gets paid there in the US is higher. Right? Where I come from is kind of the rural area. So in Texas, I come from the kind of the farming area. And yeah, sure, people have a little bit more money than your average person in rural Kenya, right? It's probably quite a bit more, but it's not like these are the wealthy people, that are,
I see.
hanging out at the Karen Country Club, or,
I see.
doing, and so, you really have to talk to people and have them understand. A lot of times they're giving their hard-earned money to the cause, and they have a lot of competing interests. There's other problems in the U.S. as well. There's homelessness, there's drug addiction, there's education, there's a lot of needs. And so it does take a lot of convincing to say, hey, I know you have all these problems here, but I want to go to, I started northern Uganda. I'm going to go to northern Uganda, these people you don't know anything about, and I want you to give me this amount of money, and I'm going to go educate them. And so, yes, the money is sort of there, not really. I mean, it's not like there's just loads of money to go around. And I would say the access to money is probably more so than here in East Africa. You know what I'm saying? I think there's more money to go around, but it's also harder to convince people. And also at the same time, it's, convincing people, like when I moved here, to say, hey, I'm going to up in my life. I had, young children at the time, have to sell everything I own. I had a a very nice paying job, very high end job. I said, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to come and leave all that behind and move to Kenya. And now I'm going to do this nonprofit work, missionary work, working through the schools, building up education. And, my grandfather, knowing so little about Africa, the one advice he gave to me says, don't get killed by the apartheid. Like the apartheid
Wow.
was a people,
Wow.
that's and I'm going to Kenya, or,
Yeah. Interesting.
they
Yeah.
don't know anything.
Yeah.
And they still don't know anything.
Yeah.
I remember I'd been here a year already, and we got a letter that had been sent out. One of the family members was sending out a letter about the entire family, all the family members in the U.S. And they sent out an update about what all the family members are doing. And then somebody said, well, yeah, and please pray for Scott and his family. They're missionarying in South Africa.
Yeah.
I was in Kenya.
Yeah.
Nobody knows
They
what I'm
they think
doing.
Africa is one big country, I
Yeah,
think.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
like, do you know my friend in Ghana? And I know this guy in Ghana. Do you know him?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting concept, right? And I think it's hard to know how to convince people to get the funds to do these type of programs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. And that's ultimately why I sort of moved away from the nonprofit space, just because the self-sustainability. I think it sounds like they're giving you great advice to say you have to be self-sustainable.
Yeah.
You have to find yourself and align yourself with the people who can sustain you,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise people will help you out, but it's not going to last forever, I guess.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have to have the self-sustainability,
Yeah, that's
which is
true.
critical.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they give you other tools of how to do that. But I always
Yeah.
find it very challenging.
So I mean, the Milestone Makers program was life-changing,
Hmm.
just to say the least. And yes, they did give me tools, because what would happen is, once you identify a milestone for your organization, and for us that was building financially sustainable frameworks for the organization.
Yeah.
So once you identify a milestone, they give you a business coach, and
Uh-huh.
they give you a mentor
Yeah.
who works with you for a 3-month period.
Yeah.
And then over the course of the 3 months, they also bring in different experts in the market,
Uh-huh.
and you're taught a whole lot of things. So it's not just limited to whatever milestone you're working
Right.
on. So yeah, there was a ton I took away from the program, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And then I saw this thing where you were on the like Times Square for the NASDAQ or something. What was that all about?
Yeah, so I mean, and I think that's one of the other highlights of the program. So
Yeah.
the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, once you graduate from the Milestone Makers program,
Hmm.
at the end of the 3 months, they help. So basically, they feature you and your business on the NASDAQ Tower in Times Square.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very surreal moment and
Uh-huh.
very emotional, because to imagine seeing your face on such a global stage,
Uh-huh.
something that I'm sure many of us had not even imagined would happen,
Yeah.
at least not at this time.
That seems like the thing you're calling all your friends and family and says, go,
Exactly,
go check this
exactly.
out.
Yeah, and it's just a testament to how far we've come, I think, as a business, and the global potential for the kind of work that we do. So yeah, that was something else. It's something you would never forget,
Yeah.
that experience after you
Wow. Yeah,
graduate.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And how long did was your face there? Was it just like a short, like
Oh, yeah,
couple
it's
minutes?
short. It's short, but then you could always go back to the video and keep watching it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, just a couple of minutes though.
Yeah, that's amazing though.
Yeah.
They get that opportunity. And so what do you see as like the next step to, you know, you're doing this training, how do you get it to that international stage? How do you get the people that you're working with to that international stage essentially?
So how do I get the
Yeah,
learners, or
yeah,
just?
like, yeah, the learners, like in just, all the knowledge you're transferring here in Kenya. How does now Kenya go to the national stage with this?
And so I think that it still drills back to what I said, how we position ourselves as brains for AI,
Hmm.
because now AI is no longer just a niche concept. I
Right.
would say now AI has become a core concept,
Hmm.
and everyone is beginning to pay attention,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So with the current trajectory of things, especially with all the movement that's happening just in Africa alone, and the kind of awareness that's beginning to happen, I think we are trying to position ourselves, like I said, as that bridge, right, between the grassroots and the global AI economy and the global AI ecosystem. So, and part of that would have to include strategic partnerships, for instance. So, if we can partner with, some companies which would be willing to absorb, some of our learners who maybe are graduating and now have these skill sets,
Right.
and they can give them internships or scholarships or any kind of avenue that would give them opportunities within the field of AI. That's the goal. So again, we increase the level of AI expertise on the continent and then get them to see themselves as change makers. And now they're so excited, they're building solutions that are addressing challenges in their own local communities.
Uh-huh.
And if they choose maybe not to become entrepreneurs, so maybe they can have companies absorbing them and giving them jobs and internships, or even going to research. But the goal is to create this pipeline where they can always come back and draw from, because now we have a vibrant AI ecosystem.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, they have a lot of conversation now about the ethics of AI, and like
Mm-hmm.
everybody's very afraid of AI going bad. How could you see AI going bad here in East Africa?
We've already seen that, I
Yeah.
think, happening even just this year alone. I think there was a time we had a lot of deep fakes circulating,
Hmm.
and so um, like with every powerful tool, I would say with every powerful technology, there are always challenges and downsides, right? And I think one of the challenges that have come with AI, as much as there are tons of new, like job opportunities that are coming up, entire career paths that are being created
Yeah.
just because AI is in play, we also have challenges like misinformation, and yeah, so one of those challenges, I think, which I saw just recently, a couple of weeks ago, is the deep fakes, these videos and images that
Uh-huh.
are being created, and even audio that appear very real,
Uh-huh.
but they are AI generated, and
Sure.
then those can be utilized for, maybe political manipulation,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and even defamation. So we've seen a lot
Have
of
you
that.
actually seen one that really stuck out to you?
Yeah, I've seen some politicians dancing and doing funny things on the internet, and that caused a ruckus online on Twitter,
Uh-huh.
on X, sorry. So I've seen that in play. People, and Kenyans are very creative. They are very imaginative. So they were yeah. I've seen some very funny
So
things
so the politicians
happening.
are doing some things that
Yeah,
they're
very,
really not doing, but
yeah,
it's like an
yeah,
AI
very,
deep fake.
yeah, very, very interesting things.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
so easy to do. I bet I could just pull out my phone and get on an app and say I want this politician to
yeah,
be
yeah,
doing, some bad behavior and dancing and doing some things they're not supposed to be, and it would go viral instantly.
yeah.
Wow.
And then just apart from misinformation, I think
Hmm.
the other challenges that have come with AI are maybe bias. I
Yeah.
think that's also something that's
Uh-huh.
that's already happening. And AI de largely depends on data, like the AI models are
Yeah.
trained on data.
Right.
So, and if this data already has a history of having bias, then AI can unintentionally amplify these societal inequalities.
Right.
And a good example would be maybe hiring tools
Yeah.
that tend to filter out a certain type of candidate
Yeah.
over
Exactly.
another, or
Hmm.
favor one type of candidate over another.
Uh-huh.
Because I know people use AI in the hiring tools today just to sift through tons and tons of resumes.
Yeah.
So I think that's another challenge. Bias
Sure.
is happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. We had a guy on the podcast recently he was like an executive search person. Kind of hired for these high levels,
Mm-hmm.
CEO type roles and did executive search, and he sort of alluded to this. He couldn't really talk about it much, but a lot of times companies come and they want these certain attributes that aren't necessarily related to the job,
I
right?
see. Yeah.
You know, so even though you're not supposed to say I want a candidate that looks a certain way, or it's mainly about values, right? Okay, I need a Christian candidate who doesn't drink alcohol, and you think
Yeah.
that they're just hiring on, okay, I have my CV and I've done AI for 10 years and
Yeah.
everything, but they really are coming and saying, okay, I want the profile that looks like
I
this
see.
certain candidate.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like you said, AI probably is helping to filter through that and add
Mm-hmm.
this kind of bias to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
certain candidates. because I think everybody sort of feels like there's this conversation that this bias exists,
Yeah.
but nobody's really talking about it, I
Yeah.
guess, is what
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, there's a lot of reasons why it probably shouldn't exist, or shouldn't be there. But then there's the reality of what happens, right?
Yeah.
So I think AI might make that situation worse, like you're
Yeah.
saying.
It tends to amplify those
Yeah, it helps
inequalities.
to filter out. I know, when I hire for software engineers, I might get 1,000 applications for one software
Just
engineering
one
job,
role. Yeah.
and let's say we're hiring 10 software engineers in a year. You get, that could be 10,000 CVs, and you can't spend time to go through every single one. Now, what I do, I physically go through as many of them as I can, or I have my engineering managers, go through and filter through them. And we haven't used those AI tools because I feel like they might throw away good candidates, that you might miss some like small thing, but you don't have a lot of time to go through the CV.
Yeah.
You may have like a minute. So you find yourselves, you know, almost piles where you're just,
Yeah.
throwing things here or there because you have to
Yeah.
go through it so quickly. To go through, let's say, 10,000 CVs, you just don't have the time when you're doing your regular job to go through it. But I still kind of believe in that manual, going through and sort of checking. Now, maybe you could have a recruitment agency or somebody else do that initial filtering, but yeah, I'm afraid the AI is taking over that market for sure.
And I personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with using AI just to make your work more efficient and easier.
Yeah.
Because even for those recruitment agencies, I mean, it would be a pain
Yeah.
going over,
Well, they
like
have hundreds
thousands
of
and
thousands
thousands.
of
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Mhm.
But then I think the issue is maybe now for the companies that are choosing to use these tools,
Mhm.
maybe should focus on the training data. Let's fix that problem at the training data stage,
Yeah.
so that we eliminate the bias, and then now we have more efficient and fair
Yeah.
AI tools, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of people through the podcast who've mentioned that, maybe they've gone and searched for a job or something like that, and uh, like with the AI tools now, it's like impossible for them. They might be coming and say, "Oh, okay, I've got 30 years of experience as this advanced engineer doing these things," and then
Yeah.
they don't even get a call back from companies,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like it's quite crazy. So it's like, how do we balance out the tools where the recruiting agencies can use it effectively, help them with their job, but not be filtering out qualified candidates as well,
Yeah.
and bring that bias in, I think, is the biggest challenge,
Yeah.
which I'm sure the AI doesn't make that any easier. Well, it's really interesting. So I guess AI is now here. You're going to be pushing it. You're trying to get it out there in front of everybody. It's here to stay, and seems like the net benefit is way better than the negatives
Yeah.
that you've seen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Has there been any crazy situations you've seen that have come out of AI outside the deep fake stuff? Have you seen anything else that's like been just a crazy, AI thing that's happened that people would be surprised to learn is actually happening in the country?
So I wouldn't call it crazy. Maybe more of a again concern
Yeah,
that has just come up with AI.
yeah.
And I remember, I don't know if the year was 2022, where, OpenAI had this WorldCoin thing, and
Mhm.
then they came, and then Kenyans were lining up at KICC,
Yeah, what was that all about? That was crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was quite crazy. And I think so the issue of concern here is the fact that I think most people don't understand the challenge that comes with privacy as
Hmm.
far as AI is concerned.
Yeah,
So again, the issue here is, when AI is collecting, or organizations are collecting a lot of information, and some of this information is sensitive and personal,
right.
then there's a fine line between helpful and harmful.
Yeah,
Okay. So, and we don't have proper guardrails
hmm,
to check AI and how it's being used with this regard in terms of data privacy,
yeah,
then I think we run a risk of infringement on our digital rights.
yeah,
And so, yeah, so Kenyans were excited because I think all people were told was you'll get X amount of money in your, and it wasn't even physical cash. I
right.
think
It
it
was
was,
coins.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So yeah, and people were giving away all of their biometric data, which is crazy. So and again, that goes back to what we're trying to do. So most people don't understand this data privacy issue and how it works, and who's guarding your data, who has access to your data, how much data you're willing to give. So I think there's a lot of learning that needs to happen, at least for the local person. In Swahili there's this phrase we say kwa ground. Kwa ground is direct translation for on the ground, which just means you have high level initiatives and plans and ideas, but then once it trickles down, how does it affect this person literally on the ground, the local person? So a lot of training needs to happen qua ground,
Oh yeah,
for the
exactly.
local people.
No, I mean, it's definitely a concern. I've experienced it a lot. The last few weeks I've been traveling in the US, and my dad, he's an older guy, and I'm sure when he signs up for websites or things like that, he just types in his information wherever.
Yeah.
And so I noticed at least 10 times a day he was getting these phone calls from different, usually the scammers in India or whatever, you need to go get a Google Play card or something and send the money.
Yeah.
These scams that happen, but it's like literally 10 times every day he would get these calls trying to, because somebody's taking his information, and most of the time these are AI bots that are calling. They even sound like a real lady you're talking to on the phone, but it's really just a bot, and you could barely even tell. They know how to respond to your voice. They're very sophisticated. And I was trying to help him get off these call lists, or I was trying to help him to see, can you get off these calls? Because literally it would be like 10 times every day.
Wow.
While you're driving, while you're eating, these people keep calling. Anyway, somehow when I was trying to help him with that, somehow I accidentally got on these lists for these calls. And so now I'm back here in Kenya and I have a US phone number. It's like an app, one of these US phone numbers. Now every day, like at 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm getting these calls waking me from some loan. Here, we want to offer you loans for things, health insurance.
It's like those cold calls, marketing calls, something
Yeah,
like
cold
that.
call marketing calls. And once they get your information, they feed it into their AI systems to see what offers would you be interested in. They use your personal data. Somehow it's all connected together, and people are selling the data, they're marketing it.
Yeah.
And then they start calling you. And even for this podcast, right, I was sure to put my phone on the silent mode, because I knew I would get like 2 calls now from these guys that are just trying to sell you something that you don't want, you don't need. You tell them, don't put you on the don't call list, and they still keep calling. So it's when everybody was signing up with their biometrics and everything now, I think the main thing I see are these things on Safaricom, right? It's always a SMS that comes in, hey, I'm offering you a logbook loan, or I'm offering all kinds of crazy stuff. And now they've got your information, they'll have it forever without changing your number. Well, it's really crazy. Well, it's an exciting world out there. Was there anything else you'd like, our listeners to know about AI and the journey with it, or you covered it pretty well?
So I think maybe my parting shot would be just because I know there's also a growing concern. People always ask, especially at these workshops, that is AI coming to take our jobs? That's a very popular question that we get. Everyone is always asking, but then this AI is not a positive thing. It's coming to take our jobs. That's a growing sentiment. But then I agree. Yes. So the answer to that is yes and no. And yes, in the sense that AI is definitely changing the landscape of work. So, excuse me, it's changing how we do work. And you have some of these repetitive manual and rules-based roles, for example, data entry, and you have roles like basic customer service, for instance, and even certain types of writing or legal reviews. AI is already replacing those, and it's making them faster and cheaper. But then, so something people always fail to see is that at the same time, AI is also creating new jobs. So it's not just taking away jobs, it's creating new jobs. And so you have entire career paths, for example, prompt engineering now, and you have AI analysts or AI ethicists, careers that didn't exist a few years ago, right? So I would say AI is changing the rules of the game, but we still get to decide how we play. That's how I see it. And it's not that AI is is replacing people, but people who have learned how to use AI are replacing the people who don't.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective on the
Sure.
issue. So it's not that it's just taking jobs. Yes, automation is taking place, and we are seeing this across many industries: healthcare, logistics, education, agriculture, you name it. There's
Right.
AI being adopted, but then AI is not really replacing people. It's the people who have learned how to use AI that are replacing the people who don't. So I don't think learning how to use AI is an option anymore.
Yeah.
I think this is it's now it's a demand. It's not a niche skill. It's a
Sure.
core competency at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like any revolution that we've had where, people used to do accounting on paper, and have big books with journal entries on paper and then move to doing spreadsheets and accounting software, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the people who were able to adapt and use that software are the ones
Yeah.
who got jobs and probably had better paying jobs by
Mm-hmm.
by moving. And the people who stayed doing pen and paper, they probably struggled, and over time their jobs suffered. Or people used to do engineering, draftsmanship. They used to draw out all the architectural drawings and draw all the, maybe you're building a car or something. They would draw it all by hand,
Mm-hmm.
and then the software came, and then you had to become up to date on the software, how to use it. So I think we always have these revolutions that happen, and it's happened even way back in the history. People used to drive horses. They used to
Yeah.
you know carry by horse and carriage, and then they realized, okay, now I'm going to drive a car. And when you shifted, you got a job. If you weren't able to shift and adapt, then maybe, yeah, you had some problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't that the jobs went away; they just changed how
Yeah.
the jobs look like.
Yeah.
And in general, the jobs that people are getting, they're much more efficient. Thus, they should be making more money, and they should be,
Mm-hmm.
able to compete with the world economy. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's exciting. Well, I think that's about all the questions I have for you, Esther. It's been great having you on the podcast, and I don't know if there's any other questions you have for me, but I think it's been really good talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.